They thought they were targeting a simple cafe in a sleepy Montana mountain town, just another business to absorb into their operation. The Avalanche syndicate had expanded across 3 states, taking over local establishments through a combination of threats and violence. But as they surveyed the quaint coffee shop run by an unassuming middle-aged woman, they made 3 fatal mistakes that would bring their entire criminal empire crashing down. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Chen stood behind the counter of the Mountain Brew Cafe, methodically wiping down the espresso machine as the morning sun streamed through the front windows. Her movements were precise, efficient, the kind of economy of motion that came from 20 years as a military intelligence operative specializing in deep cover operations across Asia. The cafe's resident therapy dog, a gentle golden retriever, named Scout, suddenly tensed beside her, his ears pricking forward as a black SUV with tinted windows crawled past for the 3rd time that week. The cafe had become Sarah's sanctuary after retiring from covert operations, a place to serve her community while maintaining a careful watch over the strategic mountain pass that connected several states. She'd chosen this location deliberately, remote enough to seem innocent, but positioned perfectly to monitor suspicious traffic patterns along a key smuggling route. Today, those patterns had shifted. "Your usual, Tom," she called out warmly as the local sheriff's cruiser pulled into the gravel lot. But her eyes never left the retreating SUV, noting how it moved with too much precision to be casual traffic. Scout shifted closer to her leg, his therapy dog vest concealing the fact that he'd been specially trained to detect explosives and drugs. Sheriff Tom Martinez approached the counter, his weathered face creased with concern. 25 years of law enforcement experience had taught him to read subtle threats. "Getting some new customers lately?" he commented quietly, glancing toward the road. "3rd pass this week," Sarah replied, her voice dropping. "Same vehicle, different plates. Avalanche syndicate is pushing east." She gestured subtly toward her strategic location. "They're taking over businesses along the highway, using them as distribution points." "Miss Sarah!" A bright voice interrupted as 8-year-old Lucy Martinez bounded in, immediately heading for Scout. The dog's tail wagged as she approached, but Sarah noted how he maintained perfect position, never fully relaxing his guard. He may wear a therapy vest now, but he'd been trained by the same military K-9 program that had saved countless lives detecting narcotic shipments across Southeast Asia. "Careful there, sweetheart," Sarah called out warmly. But her eyes met Tom's, with shared understanding. The Avalanche syndicate was notorious for using legitimate businesses as fronts for their drug trafficking operation. They'd already taken over 3 establishments in the next town over, and their pattern was expanding. "The Wilson family's diner got hit last night," Tom said quietly, as Lucy played with Scout. "Offered them protection they couldn't refuse. They're working their way up the valley." Sarah's hand dropped to Scout's head, feeling the powerful muscles beneath his gentle exterior. Most people saw a therapy dog helping customers feel at ease in her cafe. They didn't know he'd spent 5 years detecting drug shipments in the Golden Triangle, or that his current vest concealed a sophisticated tracking device that monitored all nearby cellular communications. Inside the cafe's back office, carefully hidden behind a panel of local tourism brochures, Sarah maintained her own command center, Satellite uplinks connected her to former intelligence colleagues scattered across the country. The Avalanche syndicate thought they were expanding into unprotected territory. They had no idea they were walking into a carefully prepared trap. The bell above the door chimed as more morning regulars arrived. Sarah served them with genuine warmth, while Scout made his rounds, bringing comfort to elderly customers and delighting children. But both handler and dog maintained constant awareness. The SUV would be back. The syndicate never gave up easy territory. Getting reports of similar patterns in Idaho and Wyoming, Tom added, his voice pitched for Sarah's ears only. They're establishing a corridor, taking over strategic locations. Sarah nodded slightly, her mind already gaming out scenarios. She'd spent years tracking similar patterns across Asia. Criminal organizations expanding through seemingly legitimate businesses, building networks for drug distribution and money laundering. But the Avalanche syndicate had made a critical error in targeting her cafe. They thought they were moving into undefended territory. "Scout's been extra alert this week," she commented, watching her dog work the room with practiced ease. To anyone else, he appeared to be simply doing his therapy rounds. But Sarah recognized his tactical movement pattern, the way he maintained sight lines to all entrances while appearing completely casual. The morning crowd began to thin as people headed to work. Sarah used the quiet moment to check her hidden surveillance feeds. The SUV had made another pass while she was serving customers, this time moving slower, studying the cafe's layout. They were getting bolder. "They'll make their move soon," Tom said, finishing his coffee. "County resources are stretched thin. We've got backup from state police, but response time's up here." Sarah's smile held steel beneath the warmth. "We'll manage." Her hand dropped to Scout's head as he returned to her side, his muscles coiled and ready beneath the therapy vest. "Won't we, boy?" The dog's tail wagged, but his eyes never left the front windows. He'd faced down drug runners in jungle operations. A few syndicate thugs wouldn't shake his training. As Tom left, Sarah began her daily routine of preparing fresh pastries and brewing coffee, but every movement was measured, precise. The cafe's layout had been carefully designed, clear sight lines to all approaches, multiple exit routes, reinforced, walls that could withstand small arms fire. The cheerful mountain decor concealed state-of-the-art surveillance equipment. The morning progressed with practiced normalcy. Sarah served customers, Scout provided comfort, and the cafe hummed with the peaceful energy that had made it a community favorite. But beneath the surface, preparations were being made. Former intelligence operatives positioned throughout the region had been activated. Surveillance teams monitored syndicate movements. The trap was almost ready. The Avalanche syndicate thought they were targeting a simple cafe run by an unassuming woman. They had no idea they were about to confront one of the most decorated intelligence operatives in recent history, backed by a network of former agents and a dog with more field experience than their entire organization combined. Sarah checked her hidden monitors one more time as the lunch crowd began to arrive. The SUV had made another pass, this time with 3 occupants conducting detailed surveillance. Soon they would make their move, confident in their ability to intimidate a lone businesswoman in a remote mountain town. That would be their final mistake. Sarah Chen had spent her career dismantling criminal empires across Asia. Now she would teach the Avalanche syndicate why some targets should be researched more carefully before engaging. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the cafe windows. As Sarah restocked the pastry case, Scout suddenly tensed beside her, his therapy dog demeanor shifting subtly as his military training surfaced. The SUV was back, moving with deliberate slowness. This time, it stopped. The real battle for Mountain Brew Cafe was about to begin. Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she watched three men in expensive suits approach her door. They thought they were starting a simple takeover. Instead, they were walking into an operation that would dismantle their entire organization. Scout's tail still wagged gently, maintaining his cover, but Sarah felt his muscles coil with combat-ready tension. The bell above the door chimed as the men entered. Time to remind the Avalanche syndicate why some quiet mountain towns should be left in peace. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Welcome to Mountain Brew," Sarah called out warmly, her smile never reaching her eyes. "What can I get for you today?" The trap was set, the game was in motion, and Sarah Chen was about to remind the criminal underworld why she'd been legendary in the intelligence community. The Avalanche Syndicate's reign of terror across the mountain states was about to meet its match in a simple cafe with a very unusual owner and her extraordinarily well-trained dog. Little did they know, every step they took into her cafe brought them closer to their own downfall. Sarah Chen hadn't chosen this location by accident. She'd spent years preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation. The Avalanche Syndicate was about to learn why some targets weren't targets at all, but carefully prepared traps waiting to be sprung. The three men spread out as they entered Mountain Brew Cafe, taking positions that Sarah immediately recognized as tactical formation. Their expensive suits couldn't hide their military bearing. These weren't common thugs, but trained professionals. The leader, a sharp-featured man she'd later identify as Marcus Kane, approached the counter while his associates moved to cover the exits. "Lovely establishment you have here," Kane remarked, his smile practiced and cold. "Your reputation for quality reaches far beyond this little town." Sarah continued wiping the counter, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Scout maintained his therapy dog persona, but she felt his muscles tense as he tracked the men's positions. "We try our best to serve the community," she replied simply. "Coffee?" Kane's smile tightened slightly. "Actually, we're here to discuss business opportunities. My associates and I represent a development group interested in expanding local enterprises." The morning sun, streaming through the windows, caught Scout's therapy dog vest, making it shimmer. The vest concealed both his military training and the sophisticated communications equipment that was already transmitting this conversation to surveillance teams across 3 states. "I'm happy with my current business model," Sarah responded, noting how Kane's associates had positioned themselves to control the space. Their movement patterns suggested private military training, probably ex-special forces who'd gone mercenary. "But I appreciate the interest. Business is changing in these mountains." Kane's voice hardened slightly. "Small operations like yours, they become targets for unfortunate accidents. We offer protection, partnership, opportunity." Sarah allowed herself a small smile, remembering similar conversations in back alleys across Asia. "Protection from yourselves, you mean?" She met Kane's gaze directly. "The Avalanche Syndicate isn't as subtle as it thinks." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Kane's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine surprise. "You seem well informed for a simple cafe owner. And you seem overconfident for a criminal organization that's lost 3 shipments in the last month," Sarah replied calmly. She watched understanding dawn in Kane's eyes. He was finally realizing this wasn't a routine intimidation. Scout shifted position slightly, creating perfect coverage of the room while appearing to simply seek attention. Sarah scratched behind his ears, feeling combat-ready muscles beneath soft fur. "Your surveillance needs work," she continued. "I counted 6 passes yesterday. Very sloppy." Kane's associates moved closer, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. "You should consider your position carefully." Kane's voice was steel, wrapped in silk. "Accidents happen to stubborn business owners in remote locations." "Fascinating." Sarah's smile never reached her eyes. "That's almost word for word what you told the Wilson family before burning down their diner. Almost like you're reading from a script." The door chimed as Sheriff Martinez entered, his timing perfect as always. "Morning, Sarah," he called out, casually, but his hand rested near his weapon. "Getting busy in here?" Kane's team shifted uncomfortably, recognizing their tactical position had been compromised. "We'll continue this discussion later," Kane said smoothly, gesturing to his men. "Consider our offer carefully." As they left, Sarah watched their vehicle through the cafe's windows. Scout maintained his therapy dog demeanor, but his eyes never left the retreating SUV. "They'll be back," Tom said quietly, approaching the counter. "Of course they will," Sarah replied, already mentally cataloguing the encounter. "But next time, they'll bring more men, thinking they need overwhelming force." She smiled slightly. "That's when we'll have them." The sheriff nodded grimly. "State Police Task Force is on standby, DEA too, but response times up here won't matter," Sarah assured him, watching Scout make his rounds among the remaining customers. "Everything's already in motion." Throughout the day, Sarah maintained the cafe's normal routine. She served coffee, Scout provided comfort, and customers came and went unaware of the war brewing around them. But beneath the surface, an invisible machine was moving into position. Satellite feeds tracked the syndicate's vehicles as they moved. Through the mountains, surveillance teams monitored communications. Former intelligence operatives positioned themselves strategically throughout the region. The Avalanche syndicate thought they were preparing to take over a simple cafe. Instead, they were walking into an operation years in the making. As evening approached, Sarah received encrypted updates from her network. The syndicate was mobilizing significant resources. At least 20 operators, heavy weapons, professional tactical gear. They were done playing nice. "They're getting serious," Tom commented as he stopped by for his evening coffee. "Spotted. 3 more teams moving into position around town." Sarah nodded, watching Scout alert to distant vehicle movements. "They think overwhelming force is the answer. That's why they'll fail." "Because of your old intelligence network?" Tom asked, quietly. "Because they're fighting the last war," Sarah replied, remembering lessons learned in a dozen countries. "They think this is about territory, about power. They don't understand what they're really facing." As darkness fell, Sarah began her closing routine. But tonight was different. Instead of just checking locks, she and Scout ran a full tactical assessment, entry points, cover positions, fields of fire. The cafe was about to become a fortress, but not in any way the syndicate would expect. "You sure about this?" Tom asked as he prepared to leave. "We could evacuate, come back with full tactical teams." Sarah shook her head, watching Scout Patrol with increasing intensity. "This isn't just about stopping a criminal organization. This is about showing them why some communities can't be broken by force." After Tom left, Sarah activated her hidden command center. Satellite feeds showed syndicate forces moving into position around the town. They were being thorough, professional. In any normal situation, their tactical advantage would be overwhelming. But this wasn't a normal situation. And Sarah Chen wasn't a normal target. She thought back to her years in intelligence, to operations that had dismantled criminal empires across Asia. She'd learned that the biggest targets often fell to the smallest details, to patience, to preparation, to understanding that true strength rarely came from overwhelming force. Scout suddenly tensed, alerting to distant movement. Sarah checked her monitors, multiple vehicles approaching from different directions. The syndicate was making their move. "Ready, boy?" she asked quietly, feeling Scout's muscles coil with combat-ready tension. The dog's therapy vest was gone now, replaced by tactical gear that reflected his true training. He wasn't just a comfort animal anymore. He was a veteran of a dozen operations across the Golden Triangle, a warrior who had faced down drug runners in jungle firefights. Sarah touched her hidden communications panel, activating the network she'd spent years building. Around the town, former intelligence operatives moved into pre-arranged positions. Surveillance teams activated advanced tracking systems. The trap was set. The Avalanche syndicate thought they were about to overwhelm a stubborn cafe owner with superior numbers and firepower. Instead, they were about to learn why Sarah Chen had been legendary in the intelligence community, why some targets couldn't be taken by force, why some quiet mountain towns housed warriors who had never really left the fight. Through her monitors, Sarah watched the syndicate's forces approach. Their tactical formation was perfect. Their equipment, top of the line. They had every advantage, except the one that mattered most. They didn't understand what they were really fighting. This wasn't about territory or power. This wasn't even about stopping a criminal organization. This was about showing the Avalanche syndicate why some communities couldn't be broken by intimidation. Why some people fought not for profit or power, but for something far stronger. Scout moved to his final position, combat training evident in every muscle. Sarah Chen allowed herself one last smile as she watched the syndicate's forces close in. They thought they were launching an overwhelming assault on a simple cafe. Instead, they were about to learn why some quiet mountain towns stayed quiet, not because they were weak, but because they were protected by warriors who had chosen them as home. The real battle for Mountain Brew Cafe was about to begin, and it would change the criminal underworld's understanding of power forever. Behind her cafe counter, Sarah Chen prepared to remind the Avalanche syndicate why she'd been feared by criminal empires across Asia. Why Scout's military training made him more than just a therapy dog. Why some fights weren't won by the side with the most weapons, but by the side with the most to protect. The mountain night grew darker as syndicate vehicles approached from multiple directions, but darkness had always been where Sarah Chen did her best work. It was time to show the criminal underworld why some targets should be researched more carefully before engaging. The real war for the mountain passes was about to begin. and it would be fought not with overwhelming force, but with the kind of precision that came from decades of intelligence operations. The kind of dedication that came from protecting not just territory, but home. The first shots came without warning, precision fire targeting the cafe's power lines. As darkness flooded the building, Sarah Chen smiled grimly in the sudden blackness. The syndicate's forces thought they were following their standard tactical playbook. Instead, they just activated her trap. "Execute Protocol Sierra," she whispered into her hidden communication system. Scout moved like a shadow beside her, his military training transforming him from therapy dog to combat veteran. Across the mountain town, hidden teams acknowledged her command with practiced silence. Through her thermal imaging displays, Sarah watched the syndicate's forces move into what they thought were perfect assault positions. 20 operators in full tactical gear, moving with professional precision. Kane's voice crackled over their encrypted channels, which Sarah's systems had already compromised. "All teams in position. Remember, we want the building intact. This location is too valuable to damage." Sarah touched another hidden panel, activating systems that had been waiting years for this moment. The cafe's innocent mountain decor concealed a sophisticated defensive network that would have impressed military contractors. But her real advantage wasn't technology. It was understanding how to fight smarter, not harder. "They're using Romanian communications protocols," a voice murmured through her earpiece. "Recent military upgrade, very professional." "Thank you, Maya," Sarah replied softly, recognizing the voice of her former intelligence colleague, now positioned in a sniper's nest overlooking the cafe. "Looks like Kane brought in European contractors." Scout suddenly tensed, combat instincts alerting to movement at the rear of the building. Through her monitors, Sarah watched 3 operators attempting to breach the back entrance. Their technique was flawless, exactly as she'd expected. "They're testing our response times," she commented to Scout, whose muscles coiled with practiced patience. "Let's show them why some lessons from the Golden Triangle still apply in Montana." The first breaching charge detonated against the Shoe Cafe's rear door, a perfect tactical entrance that would have worked on any normal building. Instead, the specialized materials in the door's frame channeled the explosion back toward the entry team. Non-lethal, but highly effective. "West team, compromised," a panicked voice reported over the syndicate's comms. "Some kind of countercharge system." Kane's response was cold fury. "Impossible! This is a simple cafe. Check your equipment and try again." Sarah allowed herself a small smile, remembering similar moments during operations across Asia. Overconfident. Opponents making the same crucial mistake, assuming that just because something looked innocent, it was innocent. "Maya, initiate containment protocol," she commanded softly. Around the building's perimeter, hidden systems activated. The syndicate's perfect tactical position suddenly became kill zones, not for bullets, but for the most sophisticated non-lethal countermeasures available. "Target their communications first," Sarah instructed as she moved through her cafe's darkness with practiced ease. Scout followed silently, his military training making him nearly invisible. "Let's remind them why electronic warfare was always my specialty." The syndicate's encrypted communications suddenly dissolved into static. Their night vision systems flickered and died. The professional tactical advantage they'd relied on vanished in seconds. "Oh, what the hell is happening?" Kane's voice carried real fear now. "All teams, switch to backup frequencies." They can try, Maya's voice held quiet amusement. But they'll find those compromised too. Just like in Bangkok, remember? Sarah did remember. That operation had dismantled one of the largest drug trafficking operations in Southeast Asia. Now she would use the same techniques to protect her mountain community. Through her thermal imaging, she watched the syndicate's forces begin to break formation. Without communications, their perfect tactical approach became disorganized. Professional soldiers became isolated individuals, each suddenly aware of their vulnerability. "Commander, we're detecting some kind of electronic warfare system." One operator reported, his voice shaking. "This isn't a normal target." Kane's response was desperate bravado. "It's just fancy equipment. Push forward, overwhelm them with numbers." But Sarah had spent decades learning that numbers meant nothing against proper preparation. She touched another control, activating the cafe's external lighting system. Brilliant illumination suddenly flooded the perimeter, but in a specialized wavelength that rendered night vision equipment worse than useless. Scout moved to the front windows, his military training allowing him to stay perfectly hidden while observing the chaos outside. The syndicate's operators stumbled, their expensive tactical gear now working against them. "Remember," Sarah commanded, through her network, "non-lethal takedowns only. We want them alive to send a message." Maya's response was professional acknowledgement. Around the cafe's perimeter, hidden teams began moving with practiced precision. These weren't local law enforcement or federal agents. These were former intelligence operatives who had worked with Sarah Chen when she was dismantling criminal empires across Asia. "West team is down," Kane's voice crackled through failing communications. "Some kind of... I've never seen anything like this." Sarah watched through her systems as the syndicate's perfect tactical assault dissolved into confusion. Their professional operators found themselves tangled in containment nets, disabled by sophisticated sonic weapons, or simply unable to function as their equipment failed systematically. "You should have researched your target more carefully," she whispered, though she knew Kane couldn't hear. "Some quiet mountain towns stay quiet because they're protected." Scout suddenly alerted to movement. A team of operators had managed to reach the cafe's front entrance. Their breaching charge was already planted, ready to blow the doors open. "Let them in," Sarah commanded softly. The dog's muscles coiled with combat-ready tension, understanding exactly what was coming. The charge detonated, and the doors burst open. 4 operators rushed in with perfect tactical form, only to find themselves facing something their training had never prepared them for. Sarah Chen stood calmly behind her counter, Scout at her side. The cafe's interior lights snapped on, but these were specialized strobes that turned the operators' tactical gear against them. Their own equipment trapped them in a web of technological warfare. "Welcome to Mountain Brew," Sarah's voice carried quiet authority. "I'm afraid we're closed for the evening." The operators raised their weapons, but Scout was already moving. Years of military training transformed him from therapy dog to combat veteran in an instant. Before the operators could react, their weapons were gone, their tactical advantage neutralized by a dog they dismissed as simple window dressing. "Impressive equipment," Sarah commented as Scout kept the operators contained. "European military issue, very expensive. But you made the same mistake criminal organizations always make, assuming that superior firepower equals superior strength." Outside, the sound of combat was fading as Sarah's teams systematically dismantled the syndicate's forces. not through overwhelming violence, but through precise application of technology and training. "Commander, we've lost contact with all teams," one operator reported desperately into his dead radio. "This isn't possible. This was supposed to be a simple takeover." Sarah smiled, remembering similar moments in operations across Asia. "That's your first lesson," she told the captured operators. "Nothing is ever as simple as it seems, especially not in quiet mountain towns that criminal organizations think are easy targets." Through her systems, she watched Kane's vehicle attempting to flee, but the syndicate leader would find every escape route already blocked, not by overwhelming force, but by precise preparation and patience. "Your organization has 3 choices," Sarah announced to the captured operators: surrender and face federal prosecution, attempt to continue fighting and face my teams, or run and discover that every electronic system you rely on is already compromised. Scout maintained perfect tactical control of the prisoners, his military training evident in every movement. This wasn't just a therapy dog anymore. This was a combat veteran who had faced down drug runners in the Golden Triangle. "Who are you?" one operator asked, his professional confidence shattered. Sarah Chen allowed herself a small smile, just a cafe owner protecting her community. But perhaps the Avalanche syndicate should have wondered why this particular location, this specific town, attracted my attention. Outside, federal tactical teams were finally arriving, led by Sheriff Martinez. But they would find most of their work already done, not through bloodshed or overwhelming force, but through the kind of precise operations that Sarah Chen had specialized in throughout her intelligence career. "Secure the prisoners," she instructed her teams through the command network. "And make sure our evidence packages are ready for federal prosecution. The Avalanche syndicate is about to learn why some quiet mountain towns stay quiet, not because they're weak, but because they're protected by people who know real strength isn't measured in firepower." The night's operation had lasted less than 30 minutes. The syndicate's perfect tactical assault had been dismantled not through superior numbers or weaponry, but through precise preparation and understanding that true power came from protecting something worth fighting for. As federal agents began processing prisoners, Sarah watched Kane being led away in handcuffs. The syndicate leader's professional mask had cracked completely, revealing the truth she'd learned in operations across Asia, that criminal empires were often weakest when they thought themselves strongest. Scout returned to her side, his combat tension easing slightly, but his vigilance never wavering. Together, they had reminded the criminal underworld why some targets should be researched more carefully, why some quiet mountain communities stayed peaceful, not because they couldn't fight, but because they were protected by warriors who had chosen them as home. The real victory wasn't in defeating the syndicate's forces. It was in showing them why violence and intimidation would never overcome the strength that came from defending something truly valuable. The Avalanche syndicate had thought they were targeting a simple cafe. Instead, they'd learned why some battles are lost before they begin, when attackers don't understand what their targets are really fighting for. Dawn broke over the mountain town as federal agents finished processing the last of the captured syndicate operators. Sarah Chen stood at her cafe's counter, preparing coffee for the law enforcement teams while Scout maintained his watch. But something felt wrong, a tension in the air that her years of intelligence work had taught her to recognize. "They're quiet," Maya observed through Sarah's encrypted comms. Too quiet. Kane's capture should have triggered more response from the syndicate's leadership. Sarah nodded slightly, watching Scout's ears prick forward. The dog's military training was telling him the same thing. This wasn't over. Because Kane isn't their real leadership, she replied softly. He was a test. Sheriff Martinez approached. The counter, his expression grim. Just got word from DEA. The syndicate's real commander is coming, Viktor Kovalev. Sarah's hands stilled on the espresso machine. That name carried weight in international intelligence circles. Former Spetsnaz commander turned private military contractor, then criminal mastermind. She'd crossed paths with him once in Myanmar, an operation that had left scars on both sides. He was always smarter than most, she commented, remembering that confrontation. Kane's assault was exactly the kind of direct approach Kovalev would sacrifice to test our capabilities. Through her hidden monitors, Sarah watched new vehicles beginning to appear on mountain roads, not the obvious tactical teams Kane had used, but subtle infiltration units moving with true professional precision. Kovalev was already implementing his real strategy. Multiple teams detected, Maya reported. Different approach vectors, much more sophisticated. These aren't contractors. They're his personal operators. Sarah touched her communications panel, activating her wider network. All teams shift to Protocol Echo. Kovalev won't make Kane's mistakes. He'll try to turn the entire town against us. Scout suddenly tensed, combat instincts alerting to new threats. Through her systems, Sarah watched Kovalev's operators beginning their real work, not attacking directly, but infiltrating the community itself, setting up surveillance, establishing cover identities, preparing for a much more insidious assault. They're targeting our supply lines, Tom reported as his deputies monitored suspicious activity. Pressuring delivery companies, buying out local businesses, professional economic warfare. Sarah smiled grimly, remembering similar tactics from her intelligence days. Kovalev always understood that modern warfare isn't about direct confrontation. It's about controlling resources, turning communities against themselves. But the syndicate commander was about to learn why Sarah Chen had chosen this specific mountain town, why she'd spent years not just fortifying her cafe, but building something far more powerful, a community united by more than just geography. Lucy's school just got an offer for a major technology grant, Tom reported, his voice tight, from a new educational foundation that appeared overnight. Classic Kovalev, Sarah replied, watching Scout track multiple threats through the cafes. Windows, buying influence, creating dependencies, making the community feel like they need his organization's support. But where Kane had relied on brute force, Kovalev's approach was far more dangerous. His operators moved through the town like ghosts, establishing connections, making promises, identifying pressure points. This wasn't just a criminal takeover. It was social engineering on a military scale. He's offering to fund the new medical center, Maya reported from her observation post. 3 times what the community raised, very generous terms. Sarah watched her monitors as Kovalev's strategy unfolded. The syndicate commander was trying to turn her greatest strength, the community itself, into a weapon against her, making people question whether resistance was worth losing such generous support. "Your cafe stands in the way of progress," a smooth voice commented from the doorway. Sarah turned to find a well-dressed woman she recognized as one of Kovalev's top lieutenants, Natasha Petrov, expert in psychological warfare. Progress at what cost? Sarah replied calmly, noting how Scout had shifted to perfect tactical position without seeming to move at all. Your organization's kind of progress usually comes with strings attached. Natasha smiled, all professional charm. The Avalanche syndicate is evolving, Ms. Chen. We're not common criminals. We're offering real opportunities for communities that understand partnership. But Sarah had seen this strategy before, in villages across Asia. Criminal organizations, playing at legitimacy using development as a weapon. Funny how those opportunities always seem to involve drug trafficking and money laundering. So cynical. Natasha's smile never wavered. Times change. Smart operators adapt. Your military experience, your intelligence background, they could be valuable to our organization's legitimate enterprises. Scout's muscles coiled with combat-ready tension, but he maintained perfect calm. Just like his handler, he understood that some battles weren't won with force. That's what Kovalev told the villages in Myanmar, Sarah replied softly, right before his legitimate enterprises destroyed them from within. Natasha's professional mask cracked slightly. You remember Myanmar. Then you know what happens to communities that refuse partnership. But Sarah Chen allowed herself a small smile, remembering lessons learned in a dozen countries. Myanmar taught me something more important, that real strength isn't about resources or influence. It's about understanding what you're really fighting for. Through her hidden systems, she watched Kovalev's operators continuing their infiltration. They were professionals, experts at turning communities against themselves, but they had made one crucial mistake. Your strategy depends on isolation, Sarah commented, meeting Natasha's gaze directly. On making people feel like they have to choose between resistance and survival, but this community already made that choice. As if on cue, trucks began arriving at the cafe, local ranchers delivering supplies, refusing syndicate pressure to cut off Sarah's business. Community members filled the seats, demonstrating their support not with violence, but with quiet determination. Interesting. Natasha's voice carried genuine surprise. You've built quite a foundation here. Not me, Sarah replied, watching her neighbors stand together against intimidation. They built it themselves. I just reminded them why it's worth protecting. Through her monitors, she watched Kovalev's perfect strategy beginning to unravel. His operators found their psychological warfare tactics blunted by something they hadn't expected, a community that understood its own strength. Your organization's mistake, Sarah continued, is thinking that power comes from resources, from influence. Real power comes from standing together against people who would turn us against each other. Scout maintained his tactical awareness, but his tail wagged slightly as regular customers arrived, each bringing their own small act of defiance against syndicate pressure. This wasn't just a dog providing security anymore. He was a symbol of the community's resilience. You're making a mistake, Natasha warned, her professional charm cracking further. Kovalev doesn't lose, ever. But Sarah Chen had learned the most important lesson of her intelligence career. The true victory rarely came from overwhelming force. It came from understanding what you were really fighting for and knowing that some things were worth any cost to protect. Tell Kovalev that Myanmar taught me something else, she replied calmly, that even the strongest criminal empires can be broken, not by superior firepower, but by communities that refuse to be turned against themselves. As Natasha left, Sarah watched her community continue its quiet resistance. Kovalev's sophisticated strategy was being dismantled, not by violence or counterintelligence, but by something far more powerful, people standing together against those who would divide them. "He'll escalate," Maya warned through encrypted comms. "This is personal now." "Let him," Sarah replied, feeling Scout's combat-ready presence beside her. "Some battles aren't won by the side with the most resources. They're won by the side with the most to protect." The real war for the mountain community was just beginning, but Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true strength wasn't measured in firepower or influence. It was measured in the courage to stand together against those who would use fear as a weapon. Kovalev was about to learn why some quiet mountain towns stayed peaceful, not because they were weak, but because they understood that real power came from protecting something worth fighting for. The battle for Mountain Brew Cafe had become something larger, a testament to the strength that comes from refusing to let fear turn us against each other. The syndicate commander thought he was facing a simple community. Instead, he was about to confront the most powerful force of all, people, united in defending not just their homes, but their right to stand together against intimidation. The real war was just beginning, and it would be fought not with weapons, but with the kind of courage that comes from knowing exactly what you're fighting for. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through Mountain Brew Cafe's windows as Victor, Kovalev's newest strategy, unfolded. Sarah Chen watched through her surveillance systems as syndicate operatives implemented their commander's psychological warfare expertise, not with violence, but with something far more insidious. "They're offering scholarships to every high school senior in the county," Maya reported through encrypted comms. "Full rides to prestigious universities, no apparent strings attached." Sarah nodded grimly, remembering similar tactics from her intelligence days. The strings come later, once families feel indebted, dependent. Scout suddenly tensed beside her, his military training detecting a new presence before the cafe's door chimed. A man entered, expensive suit, perfect posture, eyes that had seen too much combat. Sarah recognized Alexander Volkov, Kovalev's chief strategist. "Ms. Chen," he greeted her with professional courtesy. "Your reputation precedes you. Myanmar was instructive." "Interesting choice of words," Sarah replied, noting how Scout had shifted to optimal tactical position without seeming to move. "Considering how that operation ended for your organization." Volkov smiled thinly. "Ancient history. We're here to invest in this community's future, to provide opportunities these mountains have never seen." Through her hidden monitors, Sarah watched other syndicate teams implementing Kovalev's master plan. They weren't just offering money, they were creating infrastructure, building networks of influence and obligation that would be nearly impossible to break. "Your medical center proposal is quite generous," she commented, watching his reaction. "State-of-the-art facilities, specialist care, complete debt forgiveness for current patients. Progress benefits everyone." Volkov spread his hands in a gesture of openness. "Why do you insist on viewing legitimate development as a threat?" But Sarah had seen this strategy destroy communities across Asia. Criminal organizations playing at legitimacy, using development as a weapon until their targets were too entangled to resist. "Because I've seen how your legitimate development ends," she replied quietly. "In Myanmar, in Laos, in a dozen other places where communities thought they could accept your help without losing their soul. Volkov's professional mask cracked slightly. You think small, Ms. Chen, fighting to protect one insignificant town when we offer regional transformation. Your military experience, your intelligence background, they could help shape something truly meaningful. Scout's muscles coiled with combat-ready tension, but like his handler, he understood that some battles weren't won with force. This was about something deeper than tactical advantage. Meaningful? Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Like the meaningful development you brought to those villages in Myanmar, before your organization's drugs destroyed their children's future. Through her systems, she watched more of Kovalev's strategy unfold. Syndicate operators weren't just offering resources. They were creating dependencies, making the community feel like resistance meant choosing poverty over progress. The world changes. Volkov's voice hardened. Communities either adapt or get left behind. Your resistance doesn't protect these people. It denies them opportunities for growth. But Sarah Chen had learned the most important lesson of her intelligence career, that true strength wasn't about resources or influence. It was about understanding what made communities truly resilient. You mistake development for progress, she replied, watching local residents continue to support her cafe despite syndicate pressure. Real growth comes from communities building themselves, not from becoming dependent on outside control. As if responding to her words, more trucks arrived, local businesses delivering supplies, refusing syndicate bribes to cut off Sarah's operation. Community members filled the seats, demonstrating their support not with violence, but with quiet determination. Admirable loyalty, Volkov observed with professional detachment. But loyalty doesn't build hospitals or fund scholarships. How long before they realize your principles cost their children opportunities? Sarah watched her neighbors through the cafe windows, not just customers anymore, but partners in resistance, against those who would use progress as a weapon. You're using the wrong metrics, she replied calmly, measuring progress in dollars and infrastructure. Real development comes from communities understanding their own strength. Through her monitors, she tracked Kovalev's operators continuing their campaign of influence. They were professionals, experts at making resistance seem futile against the promise of prosperity. Your organization's fundamental mistake, Sarah continued, is thinking that communities can be bought. That progress from outside matters more than growth from within. Scout maintained perfect tactical awareness, but his tail wagged slightly as regular customers arrived. Each small act of support, a reminder that some things couldn't be purchased with promises of development. Principles don't build futures, Volkov warned, his professional courtesy wearing thin. Resources do, and Kovalev controls those resources now. But Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true victory rarely came from overwhelming force or economic pressure. It came from understanding what really made communities strong. Tell Kovalev that Myanmar taught me something else, she replied. That even the strongest criminal empires can be broken, not by superior resources, but by communities that understand their real wealth isn't measured in dollars. As Volkov left, Sarah watched her community continue its quiet resistance. Kovalev's sophisticated strategy was being challenged not by violence or counterintelligence, but by something far more powerful. People who understood that real progress came from standing together. He's offering to double the school district's budget, Maya reported through encrypted comms. Complete technological modernization. Let him spend, Sarah replied, feeling Scout's combat-ready presence beside her. Some things can't be bought. Some communities understand that real wealth comes from knowing exactly what you're protecting. The war for the mountain town's future was entering a new phase. But Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true strength wasn't measured in resources or influence. It was measured in the courage to choose harder paths toward real independence. Kovalev was about to learn why some quiet communities stayed strong, not because they had the most resources, but because they understood that real progress came from growing together, not from becoming dependent on outside control. The battle for Mountain Brew Cafe had become something larger, a testament to the kind of development that comes from communities building themselves, not from accepting false progress that comes with hidden costs. The syndicate commander thought he was facing simple resistance to change. Instead, he was about to confront the most powerful force of all, people united in understanding that real growth comes from standing together, from choosing harder paths, toward true independence over easy solutions that lead to control. The real war was just beginning, and it would be fought not with resources or influence, but with the kind of courage that comes from knowing that some progress isn't worth the price of a community's soul. As evening approached, Sarah received new intelligence about Kovalev's next move. The syndicate commander was escalating, preparing to demonstrate the cost of refusing his organization's generosity. But Sarah Chen had faced similar threats before. She'd watched communities across Asia stand against criminal empires that tried to buy their future. Now she would help her mountain town show Kovalev why some things couldn't be purchased at any price. The real battle wasn't about resources or development. It was about showing the syndicate commander why some communities understood that true progress came from standing together, from choosing independence over easy solutions that led to control. Scout maintained his vigilant watch as darkness fell. His military training adapted to this new kind of warfare. This wasn't just about protecting a cafe anymore. It was about defending a community's right to choose its own future. The coming night would bring new challenges, new attempts to break the town's resistance. But Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that real strength came from understanding exactly what you were fighting for. And this community knew what. It was protecting, not just buildings or businesses, but the right to grow on its own terms, to choose harder paths toward true independence over false progress that came with hidden costs. The real war for the mountain town's future was just beginning, and it would be fought not with resources or influence, but with the kind of courage that comes from knowing that some things are worth more than any price tag a criminal empire could offer. Kovalev's response came at midnight, not with violence, but with a demonstration of true power. Sarah Chen watched through her surveillance systems as the syndicate's sophisticated operation unfolded across the mountain town. "They're freezing all financial transactions," Maya reported urgently. Every local business that refused their offers suddenly can't process credit cards. ATMs are down, electronic payments blocked. Sarah nodded grimly, watching Scout track multiple threats through the darkness. This was Kovalev's real expertise, not brute force, but systematic dismantling of resistance through control of modern infrastructure. "Local internet is being throttled," Tom added through encrypted comms. Cell service degrading. They're isolating us digitally. Through her monitors, Sarah watched the sophisticated attack unfold. The syndicate wasn't just targeting finances. They were cutting the community off from the modern world, demonstrating how dependent everyone had become on systems they controlled. The school district's new computer system just crashed, Maya continued. Medical centers' scheduling software is down. They're showing us how easily they can disrupt daily life. Scout suddenly tensed, his military training detecting approaching vehicles before they appeared. 3 black SUVs pulled up outside the cafe, their occupants moving with the kind of precision that spoke of elite military training. Viktor Kovalev himself stepped out of the lead vehicle. Sarah had only seen him once before, in Myanmar, but she'd never forgotten his presence. The calm confidence of someone who understood that modern warfare wasn't about violence, but about controlling the systems people depended on. "Impressive resistance," he commented as he entered the cafe, his accent slight but noticeable, but ultimately futile. "You understand what's happening across your town right now?" "A demonstration of control," Sarah replied calmly, noting how Scout had shifted to perfect tactical position, "showing everyone how dependent they've become on systems you can manipulate." Kovalev smiled slightly. "Not manipulation, evolution. The world runs on digital infrastructure now. Control that, and violence becomes unnecessary." Through her hidden monitors, Sarah watched the syndicate's attack continue. Local businesses couldn't process transactions. Medical records were inaccessible. School systems were paralyzed. The community was being shown just how vulnerable their modern life had become. "Your Myanmar operation taught me something important," Sarah commented, watching Kovalev's reaction. "That true power isn't about controlling systems. It's about remembering how to function without them." As if in response, customers began arriving at the cafe, paying cash, supporting local businesses that had prepared for exactly this kind of attack. The community wasn't just resisting, they were adapting, showing that some connections ran deeper than digital infrastructure. "Touching," Kovalev observed. "But how long can you maintain this? Primitive economy, modern life requires modern systems." But Sarah Chen had spent years preparing for this kind of warfare. Her cafe's systems were completely independent, hardened against exactly the type of attack Kovalev was launching. "You mistake dependency for progress," she replied, watching more community members arrive, demonstrating solidarity through simple presence. Real strength comes from understanding that systems should serve communities, not control them. Through her monitors, she watched local businesses implementing contingency plans, reverting to paper records, establishing alternate communication networks, showing that preparation meant more than just stockpiling resources. "Your resistance is costing these people their future." Kovalev's voice hardened. "A simple town cannot function in isolation from modern infrastructure." But Sarah had learned the most important lesson of her intelligence career. That true resilience wasn't about maintaining access to systems, but about understanding how to function without them. "You're fighting the last war," she replied calmly, thinking that controlling infrastructure means controlling people. This community has spent years learning a different lesson. Scout maintained his tactical awareness as more residents arrived, each bringing their own small act of defiance against digital warfare. This wasn't just about resistance anymore. It was about demonstrating that true strength came from adaptation, not dependency. "Look around," Sarah continued, gesturing to the busy cafe. "No credit cards, no electronic payments, no digital systems, and yet community endures. Business continues. Life goes on." Kovalev's professional mask cracked slightly as he watched cash transactions, paper receipts, people adapting to function without the systems he controlled. This wasn't the response he had expected to his demonstration of power. "Every community breaks eventually," he warned, "when they realize the cost of refusing modern progress." But Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true victory rarely came from maintaining control of systems. It came from understanding that real progress meant being able to function without them when necessary. "Tell your operators something," she replied. "This isn't about refusing progress. It's about understanding that real advancement comes from controlling systems, not being controlled by them." Through her encrypted networks, Sarah watched her community demonstrate its resilience. Local businesses sharing resources, people helping neighbors adapt, showing that some connections couldn't be broken by disrupting digital infrastructure. "You built an impressive operation," Kovalev acknowledged, "but you're fighting against inevitable evolution. Modern communities cannot survive without the systems we control." Sarah smiled slightly, remembering similar confrontations across Asia. "That's where you're wrong. Modern communities can't thrive without understanding how to function when those systems fail." As the syndicate commander left, Sarah watched her town continue its adaptation. Kovalev's sophisticated digital warfare was being countered not by superior technology, but by something far more powerful. People who understood that true resilience meant being able to function at any level of technological regression. "They're escalating the attacks," Maya reported. "More systems going down. They're trying to force complete digital isolation." "Let them," Sarah replied, feeling Scout's combat-ready presence beside her. "Some battles aren't won by maintaining access to systems. They're won by showing you can function without them." The real war for the mountain community had entered a new phase, but Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true strength wasn't measured in technological advantage. It was measured in the ability to adapt, to function, to thrive even when modern systems failed. Kovalev was about to learn why some quiet communities stayed resilient, not because they had the most advanced infrastructure, but because they understood that real progress meant controlling systems instead of being controlled by them. The battle for Mountain Brew Cafe had become something larger, a testament to the kind of advancement that comes from understanding that true modernity means being able to function at any level of technological sophistication. The syndicate. Commander thought he was facing simple resistance to progress. Instead, he was about to confront the most powerful force of all, people united in understanding that real evolution meant being able to thrive even when the systems they usually depended on were turned against them. The real war was just beginning, and it would be fought not with digital infrastructure or technological advantage, but with the kind of resilience that comes from knowing that true progress means never being completely dependent on systems others can control. Dawn broke over the mountain town with a different kind of silence. Kovalev's digital warfare had escalated overnight, cutting off not just financial systems, but essential services. But Sarah Chen watched through her surveillance network as something unexpected emerged from the isolation. They've shut down the regional power grid, Maya reported through their encrypted communications. But look at what's happening. Sarah smiled as she observed her community's response. Instead of panic, there was coordination, neighbors helping neighbors, local generators being shared, people adapting with a resilience that no amount of technological warfare could break. The medical center's backup systems are online, Tom added. Community volunteers are running supplies. Every critical patient is stable. Scout suddenly tensed beside her, his military training detecting new movement. Through her thermal imaging, Sarah watched Kovalev's elite teams moving into position around the town. This wasn't just about digital isolation anymore. They were preparing to show the real cost of resistance. "Interesting development," a smooth voice commented from the cafe's entrance. Sarah turned to find Kovalev's chief enforcer, Viktor Reznik, and former Spetsnaz commander turned criminal empire builder. "Your community shows unexpected adaptability." "Not unexpected," Sarah replied calmly, noting how Scout had shifted to perfect tactical position. "Just underestimated, like in Myanmar." Reznik's professional smile tightened. Myanmar was different. Those villages had nothing to lose. This community has everything: prosperity, future, children's opportunities, all hanging by a digital thread we control. But through her systems, Sarah watched something remarkable unfolding. The local school had moved classes outdoors, teachers using old-fashioned methods to continue education. Businesses were operating with paper ledgers and cash. The community wasn't just surviving digital isolation. They were showing that human connection ran deeper than technological dependency. "You mistake infrastructure for foundation," she replied, watching more customers arrive at her cafe. "Real communities are built on something stronger than digital systems." Reznik observed the busy cafe with cold calculation. Despite the power outage, business continued. Despite frozen financial systems, commerce adapted. The syndicate's sophisticated warfare was being countered by something they hadn't planned. "For the human resilience." "Admirable spirit," he acknowledged. "But spirit doesn't power hospitals or maintain supply chains. Modern life requires modern systems." Sarah allowed herself a small smile, remembering lessons learned across Asia. Modern life requires understanding that systems should serve communities, not control them. Your organization's mistake is thinking dependency equals power. Through her monitors, she watched Kovalev's teams implementing their next phase. They weren't just maintaining digital isolation. They were preparing to demonstrate how vulnerable a community became when modern infrastructure failed completely. "You're fighting inevitable progress," Reznik warned. "The world moves forward. Communities either adapt to digital reality or get left behind." But Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true progress wasn't about maintaining access to systems. It was about understanding how to function when those systems failed. "Progress isn't measured in dependency," she replied, watching her neighbors help each other adapt. "It's measured in resilience, in knowing how to thrive at any level of technological sophistication." Scout maintained his tactical awareness as more community members arrived, each bringing their own contribution to collective adaptation. This wasn't just about resistance anymore. It was about demonstrating that true strength came from human connection, not digital infrastructure. "Look around," Sarah continued, gesturing to the bustling cafe. "No power, no electronic systems, no digital connections, and yet community thrives, people adapt, life continues. Resnick's professional mask cracked slightly as he watched cash transactions, paper records, people working together to maintain essential services without modern technology. This wasn't the response Kovalev's organization had expected to their demonstration of digital power. Every community has a breaking point, he warned, when they realize the cost of refusing to submit to technological reality. But Sarah had spent years preparing her community for exactly this kind of warfare. Her cafe wasn't just a business, it was a model of resilience, showing that independence meant being able to function at any level of technological regression. "Tell Kovalev something," she replied calmly. "This isn't about refusing progress. It's about understanding that real advancement means controlling technology, not being controlled by it." Through her encrypted networks, Sarah watched her town demonstrate its adaptability. Local businesses sharing resources, neighbors helping neighbors, showing that some connections couldn't be broken by digital warfare. "You've built an impressive operation," Resnick acknowledged. "But you're fighting against the future itself. Modern communities cannot survive without the digital infrastructure we control." Sarah smiled, remembering similar confrontations in villages across Asia. "That's where you're wrong. Modern communities can't thrive without understanding how to function when that infrastructure fails." As Resnick left, Sarah watched her community continue its evolution. Kovalev's sophisticated digital warfare was being countered not by superior technology, but by something far more powerful. People who understood that true resilience meant being able to adapt to any level of technological disruption. "They're moving to cut off physical supply lines," Maya reported, trying to show that digital isolation means complete isolation. "Let them try," Sarah replied, feeling Scout's combat-ready presence beside her. "Some battles aren't won by maintaining access to systems. They're won by showing you can thrive without them." The real war for the mountain community had entered its crucial phase. But Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true strength wasn't measured in technological advantage. It was measured in the ability to adapt, to connect, to thrive, even when modern systems were turned against you. Through her monitors, she watched Kovalev's forces prepare their next move. They thought they were isolating a community, showing the cost of resistance. Instead, they were about to learn why some places stayed strong, not because they had the most advanced infrastructure, but because they understood that real progress meant never being completely dependent on systems others could control. The battle for Mountain Brew Cafe had become something larger, a testament to the kind of advancement that comes from understanding that true modernity means being able to function at any level of technological sophistication. The syndicate commander thought he was facing simple resistance to progress. Instead, he was about to confront the most powerful force of all, people united in understanding that real evolution meant being able to thrive even when the digital systems they usually depended on were turned against them. The real war was just beginning, and it would be fought not with infrastructure or technological advantage, but with the kind of resilience that comes from knowing that true progress means maintaining human connection even when digital connections fail. As night fell over the mountain town, Sarah prepared for Kovalev's next move. The syndicate commander was about to learn why some communities stayed strong, not because they had the most advanced systems, but because they understood that real power came from being able to adapt, to connect, to thrive at any level of technological sophistication. The battle for the mountain town's future had become a testament to the kind of progress that couldn't be measured in digital infrastructure or technological advantage. It would be won by people who understood that true advancement meant never letting systems become more important than the human connections they were meant to serve. Kovalev's next move came not with digital warfare or physical force, but with something far more insidious. Chen watched through her surveillance systems as the syndicate's psychological operation unfolded in ways she'd never seen before, even in her years of intelligence work. "They're targeting the children," Maya reported through encrypted ugums, her voice tight with controlled anger, using social pressure, isolation tactics, making kids whose parents resist feel like outcasts. Sarah observed through her monitors as Kovalev's sophisticated strategy played out. Syndicate operatives had infiltrated social circles, turning peer pressure into a weapon. Children of resistant families suddenly found themselves excluded, isolated, marked as the reason their friends couldn't have the latest technology or opportunities. Scout tensed beside her, his military training detecting a different kind of threat. This wasn't about violence or digital warfare anymore. It was about breaking a community's spirit by targeting its most vulnerable members. The high school's star quarterback just withdrew from the team, Tom reported grimly. His father owns the hardware store that's been helping coordinate our analog supply network. Kids being told his resistance is costing his teammates their future. Through her systems, Sarah watched the pressure build. Kovalev wasn't just attacking infrastructure. He was exploiting the natural desire of young people to belong, to have opportunities, to not be the reason their friends suffered. "Ms. Chen," a young voice called from the cafe's entrance. Sarah turned to find Lucy Martinez, the sheriff's daughter, her eyes red from crying. "Is it true? Are we the reason everyone's losing their chances?" Sarah's heart tightened, remembering similar tactics used against villages in Myanmar, but there the pressure had targeted adults. This was something far more cruel, using children's social connections as weapons against their own families. "Come here," she said softly, watching Scout shift from combat mode to his therapy dog training. The dog gently approached Lucy, offering comfort while maintaining tactical awareness. "Let me tell you a story about real opportunity." As Lucy sat at the counter, other young people began arriving, all facing similar pressure, all questioning whether their parents' resistance was worth the cost. Sarah saw Kovalev's strategy for what it was, not just breaking current resistance, but poisoning the next generation against standing up to power. "When I was in Myanmar," Sarah began, watching the young faces gather around her counter, "I saw villages facing similar choices. They were told that resistance meant losing opportunities, that standing together meant sacrificing their children's future." Through her monitors, she watched Kovalev's psychological warfare continue. More kids were being targeted, more families feeling the pressure of seeing their children suffer for their principles. "But those villages taught me something important," she continued, her voice carrying quiet strength. "That real opportunity isn't about having the newest things or following the crowd. It's about understanding what makes you truly strong." Scout moved among the young people, his therapy dog training allowing him to provide comfort, while his military experience kept him alert for threats. This wasn't just about security anymore. It was about showing a different kind of strength. "They're saying we're stuck in the past," one teenager spoke up, "that refusing their help means choosing to be left behind. Sarah smiled gently, remembering similar fears in villages across Asia. Progress isn't measured in what you have, she replied. It's measured in understanding what you stand for. Through her networks, she watched Kovalev's operation continue. Its pressure. The syndicate was expert at using social dynamics, at making resistance feel like choosing isolation and failure. But college scholarships, another young voice added, sports opportunities, everything we've worked for. Listen carefully, Sarah's voice carried decades of experience. Real opportunity isn't about what others give you, it's about what you build for yourself. As she spoke, something remarkable began happening. The young people started sharing their own stories of pressure, of exclusion, of being made to feel responsible for their community's challenges. They're trying to divide us, Lucy realized suddenly, using our friendships against each other. Sarah nodded, watching understanding spread through the young faces. Because they know that real strength comes from standing together. That's what they're really afraid of. Through her systems, she observed Kovalev's operators reacting to this unexpected development. They had counted on youth's natural desire to conform, to have opportunities, to not be different. "But what can we do?" one teenager asked. "We're just kids." Sarah's smile held quiet confidence. "You're the future of this community, and you have something they can't control, the power to choose what kind of future you want to build." As if in response, the young people began organizing themselves, not in resistance to Kovalev's pressure, but in support of each other. Creating study groups, sharing resources, showing that opportunities didn't have to come from outside control. "Look around," Sarah continued, watching this organic response develop. "They offer scholarships. You're creating your own education. Networks. They promise sports opportunities. You're building your own teams. They try to isolate you. You're choosing to stand together." Scout moved through the growing group of young people, his presence a reminder that strength came in many forms. This wasn't just about comfort anymore. It was about showing that real power came from choosing your own path. "They're targeting the next generation's hope," Maya reported through encrypted comms, trying to make them feel like resistance means choosing failure. "They don't understand hope," Sarah replied softly, watching her cafe become a gathering place for young people choosing to stand together. "Real hope isn't about what you're given, it's about what you choose to build." The war for the mountain community had entered its most crucial phase. But Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true victory rarely came from fighting pressure. With pressure, it came from showing people, especially young people, that real strength came from choosing what you stood for. Kovalev's sophisticated psychological warfare was being countered not by superior tactics, but by something far more powerful. Young people discovering that real opportunity meant building their own future, not accepting one controlled by others. Through her monitors, Sarah watched the syndicate's strategy begin to unravel. They had counted on youth's vulnerability to social pressure, to fear of missing out, to desire for acceptance. Instead, they were witnessing something remarkable. A generation choosing to stand together, to create their own opportunities, to show that real progress meant building a future on your own terms. The battle for Mountain Brew Cafe had become something larger, a testament to the kind of strength that couldn't be broken by social pressure or promises of opportunity. It would be won by young people who understood that real power came from choosing what you stood for, not from accepting what others offered. As evening approached, Sarah watched her cafe filled with young people studying together, supporting each other, showing that real opportunity came from standing together against those who would use your hopes against you. The real war was just beginning, and it would be fought not with pressure or promises, but with the kind of courage that comes from young people discovering that they had the power to choose what kind of future they wanted to build. Kovalev was about to learn why some communities stayed strong, not because they had the most resources or opportunities, but because they understood that real progress meant choosing to stand together, even when standing alone seemed easier. The battle for the mountain town's future had become a testament to the kind of strength that couldn't be measured in scholarships or social acceptance. It would be won by young people who understood that real opportunity meant building something together, not accepting something built to control you. The mountain dawn brought a chilling silence as Kovalev unleashed his masterstroke, not through technology, violence, or social pressure, but by targeting the deepest bonds of community itself. Sarah Chen watched through her surveillance systems as the syndicate's most sophisticated operation unfolded. They're exposing secrets, Maya reported through encrypted comms. Old feuds, buried scandals, private struggles, all being brought to light systematically. Through her monitors, Sarah observed Kovalev's psychological warfare experts implementing their strategy. They weren't just revealing information. They were carefully crafting narratives that turned neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend. The Henderson family's financial troubles are public now, Tom added grimly, along with implications about how they've kept their business afloat. Their biggest supporters are starting to distance themselves. Scout tensed beside her, his military training detecting a different kind of threat. This wasn't about external pressure anymore. It was about breaking the trust that held the community together. Trust is a delicate thing. Kovalev's voice carried quiet satisfaction as he entered the cafe. Your community shows impressive resilience against outside pressure. But internal doubt? That's a different kind of poison. Sarah watched through her systems as the operation continued. The syndicate wasn't just exposing secrets, they were weaving narratives that made resistance itself seem hypocritical, tainted by hidden motives and personal failings. You're not the first to try this strategy, she replied calmly, remembering similar tactics in Myanmar. Breaking communities by turning their own histories against them. Kovalev smiled coldly. But I've refined it. Every community has its shadows, its buried troubles. Expose them carefully, and people start questioning not just their neighbors, but their own reasons for resisting. Through her networks, Sarah watched the pressure build. Families who had stood together were now eyeing each other with suspicion. Long-standing friendships strained under the weight of exposed secrets and carefully crafted implications. Your old friend Elena's medical license suspension, Kovalev continued. The questions about Sheriff Martinez's evidence handling in that drug case years ago. The school board president's gambling problem, all buried, all connected to people leading this resistance. But Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true strength wasn't about being perfect. It was about standing together, despite imperfections. You mistake human complexity for weakness, she replied, watching Scout maintain his vigilant presence. Real communities aren't built on perfection, they're built on understanding and forgiveness. Kovalev's professional mask cracked slightly. Forgiveness. When people realized their children's futures were risked by leaders hiding their own failures. When they see resistance was led by those with questionable pasts. But through her systems, Sarah watched something unexpected developing. As secrets were exposed, as histories were revealed, the community wasn't fracturing as Kovalev had planned. "Look closer," she suggested quietly. "Watch what happens when people face their shadows together instead of alone." The cafe began filling with people, not despite the exposed secrets, but because of them. Families who had hidden their struggles, found support instead of judgment. Old feuds were being acknowledged and addressed openly, rather than festering in darkness. "The Henderson family isn't hiding anymore," Sarah continued. "They're getting help from neighbors who've faced similar struggles. Elena's past mistake became a lesson she uses to help others. The school board president leads addiction support groups now." Scout moved among the gathering crowd, his therapy dog training, allowing him to provide comfort while his military experience kept him alert. This wasn't just about security anymore, it was about showing that real strength came from facing challenges together. "You're missing the point of community," Sarah explained, watching understanding spread through the gathering. "It's not about being perfect. It's about being there for each other when imperfections come to light." Through her monitors, she observed Kovalev's operators struggling to adapt to this unexpected response. They had counted on secrets becoming weapons, on exposed flaws breaking bonds of trust. "Every shadow you expose," she continued, "becomes another opportunity for people to choose understanding over judgment. Every secret revealed becomes a chance to show what real community means." As if proving her words, more people arrived, each bringing their own stories of struggle, of mistakes, of challenges faced and overcome with help from neighbors who chose support over judgment. "Your strategy depends on shame," Sarah noted, watching Kovalev's reaction, "on making people feel isolated in their struggles. But real communities understand that everyone has shadows. The strength comes from facing them together." Through her systems, she watched the syndicate's psychological warfare begin to backfire. Instead of breaking community bonds, they were inadvertently strengthening them, creating opportunities for deeper understanding and genuine connection. "They're sharing their stories openly now," Maya reported with quiet amazement, "using exposed secrets as starting points for honest discussion about community support, because they're learning the most important lesson," Sarah replied. "That real strength isn't about being perfect. It's about being there for each other when imperfections come to light." The war for the mountain community had entered its deepest phase. But Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true victory rarely came from maintaining an image of perfection. It came from showing people that real community meant standing together, especially when flaws and struggles were exposed. Kovalev's sophisticated psychological warfare was being transformed into something powerful, not by superior strategy, but by people discovering that real strength came from choosing understanding over judgment, support over suspicion. Through her monitors, Sarah watched the syndicate's operation continue to unravel. They had counted on secrets becoming weapons, on exposed flaws breaking bonds of trust. Instead, they were witnessing something remarkable, a community choosing to face its shadows together, to show that real power came from supporting each other through struggles, rather than hiding them in shame. The battle for Mountain Brew Cafe had become something larger, a testament to the kind of strength that couldn't be broken by exposed secrets or revealed flaws. It would be won by people who understood that real community meant standing together, especially when imperfections came to light. As night approached, Sarah watched her cafe filled with people sharing their stories openly, supporting each other through exposed struggles, showing that real power came from choosing understanding over judgment. The real war was just beginning, and it would be fought not with secrets or shame, but with the kind of courage that comes from people discovering that they were stronger together. Not despite their imperfections, but because of how they faced them as a community. Kovalev was about to learn why some communities stayed strong, not because they were perfect, but because they understood that real power came from standing together, especially when shadows were exposed. The battle for the mountain town's future had become a testament to the kind of strength that couldn't be measured in appearances or hidden struggles. It would be won by people who understood that real community meant supporting each other through challenges rather than letting them become weapons of division. Kovalev's final assault came at midnight, not with weapons or technology, but with an offer that targeted the very heart of community resistance. Sarah Chen watched through her surveillance systems as the syndicate's ultimate strategy unfolded with devastating precision. "They're offering to restore everything," Maya reported through encrypted comms. "Not just digital systems and financial access. They're promising complete community transformation, medical center expansion, educational endowments, infrastructure development." But this wasn't just about resources. Through her monitors, Sarah observed something far more insidious. The syndicate was offering a vision of the future that made resistance seem not just futile, but selfish. "Full scholarships for every student," Tom added, his voice tight. "State-of-the-art medical equipment, economic development that would transform the entire region. They're making our stand look like we're choosing poverty over progress." Scout tensed beside her, his military training, detecting the approaching threat before Kovalev himself entered the cafe. The syndicate commander moved with quiet confidence, knowing he held what appeared to be an unbeatable position. "Your resistance has been admirable," Kovalev acknowledged, studying the cafe's quiet interior. "But now you face a different choice, not between fighting and surrendering, but between progress and pride." Through her systems, Sarah watched his offer's impact ripple through the community. This wasn't just about individual benefits. It was about transforming the entire region into something that could lift thousands out of economic struggle. "You're offering chains disguised as opportunities," she replied calmly, remembering similar tactics in Myanmar. "Development that comes with hidden costs." Kovalev smiled slightly. "All development has costs. The question is whether your principles are worth the price your community pays. How many children's futures are you willing to sacrifice for your stand?" But Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true progress couldn't be measured in promises or resources. It came from understanding exactly what you were building toward. "Tell me something," she said quietly, watching Scout maintain his vigilant presence. "In all your operations, all your takeovers, have you ever wondered why some communities resist despite overwhelming odds?" Through her monitors, she watched more people arriving at the cafe. Not just customers now, but witnesses to a crucial moment in their community's history. Because they don't understand progress, Kovalev replied dismissively. They cling to outdated ideas of independence while the world moves forward. Sarah smiled, remembering lessons learned in villages across Asia. No, they resist because they understand something you don't, that real progress isn't about what you're given, it's about what you build together. As if proving her words, members of the community began sharing their own visions of the future. Not the glossy promises of syndicate development, but something built on deeper foundations. Look around, Sarah continued, gesturing to the gathering. These people aren't choosing poverty over progress. They're choosing to build something that can't be controlled by outside forces. Through her systems, she watched understanding spread through the crowd. Kovalev's offer wasn't just about resources, it was about surrendering the right to choose their own path. The medical center may be smaller, one resident spoke up, but it serves our community's real needs, not someone else's agenda. Our schools might not have the latest technology, a teacher added, but they teach our children values that matter more than equipment. Scout moved among the growing crowd, his therapy dog training allowing him to provide comfort while his military experience kept him alert. This wasn't about resistance anymore. It was about showing what real progress looked like. You offer development, Sarah observed, watching Kovalev's reaction, but these people are building something far more valuable, a future they control. Themselves. Through her networks, she watched the community's response continue to evolve. Instead of being tempted by syndicate promises, they were sharing their own dreams of development, slower perhaps, but built on foundations that couldn't be corrupted. Your resistance cost them everything, Kovalev warned, his professional mask cracking slightly. While other communities prosper with our help, you choose to stay behind. But Sarah had spent years learning that true prosperity couldn't be measured in immediate gains. It came from building something that would last beyond any single generation. You still don't understand, she replied quietly. These people aren't choosing to stay behind. They're choosing to move forward on their own terms. The cafe filled with more community members, each bringing their own vision of progress, not the quick transformation Kovalev promised, but something built through collective effort and shared values. We're not refusing progress, Sarah continued, watching understanding spread. We're refusing to let progress become a weapon used against us. Through her monitors, she watched Kovalev's strategy begin to unravel. He had counted on people's natural desire for improvement, for opportunity, for immediate gain. Instead, he was witnessing something remarkable. A community choosing to build its own future, understanding that real progress meant controlling not just resources but the direction of development itself. They're starting to withdraw the offers, Maya reported through encrypted comms, moving to more aggressive tactics. Let them, Sarah replied softly. Some victories aren't won by accepting or refusing offers. They're won by showing there's another way forward. The war for the mountain community had entered its final phase, but Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true victory rarely came from choosing between options others presented. It came from creating options of your own. Kovalev's sophisticated strategy was being transformed into something powerful, not by superior resources, but by people discovering that real progress meant building something that couldn't be controlled by outside forces. Through her monitors, Sarah watched the syndicate's operation continue to shift. They had counted on people's desire for immediate improvement, for visible progress, for quick transformation. Instead, they were witnessing something remarkable. A community choosing to build its own future, showing that real development meant moving forward together, not accepting progress that came with hidden costs. The battle for Mountain Brew Cafe had become something larger, a testament to the kind of progress that couldn't be bought or controlled. It would be won by people who understood that real development meant building something that would last, beyond any single generation. As dawn approached, Sarah watched her cafe filled with people sharing their visions of the future, supporting each other's dreams of development, showing that real progress came from choosing to build something together, rather than accepting something built to control you. The real war was just beginning, and it would be fought not with promises or resources, but with the kind of courage that comes from people discovering that they had the power to choose what kind of future they wanted to build. Kovalev was about to learn why some communities stayed strong, not because they had the most resources or quickest path to progress, but because they understood that real development meant building something that couldn't be corrupted by outside control. The battle for the mountain town's future had become a testament to the kind of strength that couldn't be measured in immediate gains or visible transformations. It would be won by people who understood that real progress meant moving forward, together, on their own terms, toward a future they controlled themselves. Content warning. This story contains non-graphic references to violence. The Mountain Dawn brought Kovalev's ultimate response, not with violence or offers, but with a demonstration of what happened to communities that chose their own path. Sarah Chen watched through her surveillance systems as the syndicate's forces implemented their commander's most brutal strategy. "They're targeting everything," Maya reported urgently. "Not just infrastructure or services. They're systematically dismantling every independent business, every community project, everything people have built themselves." Through her monitors, Sarah observed the operation unfold with military precision. The syndicate wasn't just destroying resources, they were strategically eliminating every example of independent development, every sign that communities could progress on their own terms. Scout suddenly tensed beside her, his military training detecting multiple approaching threats. Through thermal imaging, Sarah watched Kovalev's elite teams moving into position around the town, preparing for a demonstration of power that would echo across the region. "First, we show them the cost of independence." Kovalev's voice carried cold satisfaction as he entered the cafe. "Then we show them the benefits of compliance, a lesson your Myanmar villages never learned." But Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true strength wasn't measured in what you could destroy. It came from understanding exactly what you were protecting. "Your mistake," she replied calmly, watching Scout shift to combat readiness, "is thinking destruction demonstrates power. Real power is shown in what people choose to rebuild." Through her systems, she watched Kovalev's forces begin their systematic assault on community independence. Local businesses were being shut down through coordinated legal and financial attacks. Independent projects were being dismantled through carefully orchestrated pressure. "This isn't about punishment," Kovalev explained, studying Sarah's reaction. "This is about showing them the futility of resistance. When everything they've built independently fails, they'll understand the value of our protection." But Sarah had seen similar tactics fail in villages across Asia. Communities that understood their own strength couldn't be broken by demonstrations of power. They were strengthened by them. "Watch carefully," she suggested quietly. "You're about to learn something about real resilience." As if in response to her words, the community began responding, not with resistance or despair, but with a kind of determination that no amount of strategic destruction could break. "They're shutting down the independent medical clinic," Maya reported. "But look at the response." Through her monitors, Sarah watched something remarkable unfold. As syndicate forces dismantled official facilities, community members were transforming homes into treatment centers. Medical professionals were adapting, creating networks of care that couldn't be controlled or shut down. "The independent school program is next," Tom added. "They're invalidating certifications, freezing resources." But even as Kovalev's teams implemented their strategy, teachers were already reorganizing. Classes moved to community spaces, knowledge shared through networks that didn't depend on official recognition. "You're teaching them the wrong lesson," Sarah observed, watching Scout track multiple threats while maintaining his calm presence. "Every system you destroy shows them they can build something stronger." Through her networks, she watched the community's response continue to evolve. As syndicate forces dismantled official structures, people were creating alternatives that couldn't be targeted so easily. "Look around," she continued, gesturing to the gathering crowd in her cafe. "You're not breaking their independence, you're teaching them to build systems that can't be broken." Kovalev's professional mask cracked slightly as he watched businesses adapt, services transform, community bonds strengthen under pressure. This wasn't the response his strategic destruction was meant to produce. "They'll learn," he insisted, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "When everything they try independently fails, they'll understand the need for our organization's support." But Sarah Chen had spent years learning that true victory rarely came from preventing failure. It came from showing people they could rebuild from anything. "You still don't understand what you're really fighting," she replied quietly. "This isn't about resources or services. This is about people discovering their own strength." Through her systems, she watched the community's transformation accelerate. As Kovalev's forces destroyed official infrastructure, people were building unofficial networks that were harder to target, harder to control. "The farmers' market is adapting," Maya reported with growing excitement. "They're creating a mobile system, changing locations daily. Syndicate forces can't track the pattern." "Independent businesses are going underground," Tom added. "Operating through community networks that don't show up on official records." Scout moved through the gathering crowd, his military training allowing him to maintain security while his therapy dog experience helped calm fears. This wasn't just about resistance anymore. It was about showing what real community resilience looked like. "You're not destroying independence," Sarah observed, watching understanding spread through the gathering. "You're forcing it to evolve into something you can't control." Through her monitors, she watched Kovalev's strategy continue to backfire. Each attempt to demonstrate the cost of independence was instead showing people how to build systems that couldn't be targeted so easily. "They're adapting faster than we can respond," one of Kovalev's operators reported urgently. "Every structure we dismantle is being replaced by something more resilient." Sarah smiled, remembering similar transformations in villages across Asia. "That's the real power of community," she explained. "Not in what they can prevent from being destroyed, but in what they choose to rebuild." The war for the mountain town had entered its final phase, but Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true victory rarely came from maintaining existing structures. It came from showing people they could build something stronger from whatever remained. Kovalev's sophisticated destruction was being transformed into something powerful, not by resistance, but by people discovering that real strength meant being able to adapt, to rebuild, to grow stronger from every attempt to break them. Through her network, Sarah watched the community's evolution continue. They weren't just replacing destroyed systems. They were building new ones that were more resilient, more adaptable, more deeply rooted in community strength. "You chose the wrong target," she told Kovalev quietly. "You thought you were fighting against independence. Instead, you're teaching people how to build independence that can't be broken." The battle for Mountain Brew Cafe had become something larger, a testament to the kind of strength that couldn't be destroyed by strategic pressure. It would be won by people who understood that real power came not from preventing destruction, but from choosing what to rebuild from it. As evening approached, Sarah watched her cafe filled with people sharing resources, adapting strategies, showing that real resilience meant being able to rebuild something stronger from every attempt to break you. The real war was just beginning, and it would be fought not with resistance or despair, but with the kind of courage that comes from people discovering that they could build something stronger from whatever remained. Kovalev was about to learn why some communities stayed strong, not because they could prevent destruction, but because they understood that real power came from choosing how to rebuild from it. The battle for the mountain town's future had become a testament to the kind of strength that couldn't be measured in what you could protect from destruction. It would be won by people who understood that real resilience meant building something stronger from every attempt to break you. Morning light filtered through Mountain Brew Cafe's windows as Sarah Chen surveyed what her community had built from the ashes of Kovalev's attempted destruction. 1 month had passed since the syndicate commander's final assault, and the transformation was remarkable, not because of what had been restored, but because of what had been created in its place. "They're still watching," Maya reported through encrypted comms. "Syndicate observers trying to understand what happened here, how their perfect strategy created something they can't control." Through her monitors, Sarah watched new patterns of community life unfold. Where Kovalev had destroyed official businesses, a network of mobile markets had emerged. Where he had dismantled traditional services, adaptive community systems had taken root. Scout moved with renewed energy beside her, his military training now adapted to protecting something far more precious than territory, the spirit of independence itself. "The state governor's office called again," Tom mentioned as he collected his morning coffee, "wanting to study our community resilience model for implementation elsewhere." Sarah smiled, watching more customers arrive, not just for coffee now, but to participate in the daily exchange of resources and support that had become the heartbeat of their transformed community. 3 more towns have adopted our mobile market system," Maya added, "creating their own versions of the networks. We built under pressure, but the real victory wasn't in what they had built. It was in what people had discovered about themselves in the process of building it." "Miss Chen," Lucy Martinez called out as she entered, no longer the uncertain teenager questioning resistance, but a leader in the youth community network that had emerged from the conflict. "The independent study program is expanding," 5 more communities want to join our learning exchange. Sarah watched Lucy's confidence as she organized the day's education activities. The syndicate's attempt to isolate young people had instead taught them to create their own opportunities. "Tell me something," a familiar voice commented from the doorway. Sarah turned to find Natasha Petrov, Kovalev's former psychological warfare expert, studying the cafe's activity with professional interest. "How did you know that pressure would create this instead of breaking them?" "Because real strength isn't about what you can prevent," Sarah replied, watching Scout maintain his vigilant but welcoming presence. "It's about what you choose to build from whatever remains." Through her systems, she observed the community's continuing evolution. What had started as resistance to syndicate control had become something far more powerful, a model of independence that couldn't be broken because it grew stronger from every challenge. "Your medical network is particularly impressive," Natasha acknowledged. "Decentralized treatment centers, mobile clinics, community health monitoring, more effective than traditional hospitals in many ways." Sarah nodded, remembering similar transformations in villages across Asia, because it was built from understanding real needs, not from imposing standard solutions. The cafe hummed with morning activity as people arrived, not just customers, but participants in the complex exchange of resources and support that had replaced traditional economic systems. The syndicates withdrawing from the region entirely, Maya reported through encrypted comms. Kovalev's final report called it terrain unsuitable for standard operations. They can't control what they don't understand. But Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true victory wasn't about defeating enemies. It was about building something that made their strategies irrelevant. "Your community's adaptation has attracted attention," Natasha observed. "Not just from law enforcement studying your resistance, from development experts studying your reconstruction." Through her monitors, Sarah watched the day's patterns unfold. The mobile markets coordinating their locations, the education networks sharing resources, the health services adapting to changing needs. Because what we built isn't just about providing services, she explained, watching understanding spread through the morning crowd. It's about showing people they can build solutions that truly serve their communities. Scout moved among the gathering people, his therapy dog training now serving a community that had learned to face challenges together. This wasn't just about security anymore. It was about protecting the spirit of independence itself. "Other communities are studying your model," Natasha continued, "not just for resistance, but for genuine development. You've created something we never expected." Sarah smiled, remembering similar moments in villages across Asia. Because real progress isn't about following established patterns. It's about understanding what your community truly needs, then finding ways to provide it that can't be controlled or corrupted. Through her networks, she watched the ripples of their transformations spread. Other towns weren't just copying their systems. They were learning to adapt the principles to their own unique needs and resources. The governor's office called it sustainable independence, Tom reported. "They're talking about making it a model for rural development across the state. But the real victory wasn't in official recognition. It was in watching people discover their own capacity to build solutions that truly served their needs." "Your Organization's mistake, Sarah told Natasha quietly, was thinking you were fighting against independence. Instead, you taught people how to build independence that couldn't be broken. The morning continued as the cafe filled with activity. Not just business, but the complex dance of community support that had emerged from conflict. People weren't just buying coffee. They were participating in a system of exchange that had grown stronger from every attempt to break it. "They're still trying to understand what happened here," Maya reported, "how pressure created strength instead of weakness." "Because real strength isn't about resources or systems," Sarah replied, watching her community continue its evolution. "It's about understanding that every challenge is an opportunity to build something better." The battle for Mountain Brew Cafe had become something larger, not just a story of resistance, but a model for how communities could build genuine independence that grew stronger from every challenge. As noon approached, Sarah watched young people gathering for their independent study sessions, medical professionals coordinating mobile clinics, businesses adapting to serve real community needs. This wasn't just recovery from conflict. It was transformation into something that couldn't be controlled, because it was built on genuine understanding of what people truly needed. "Your community's message is spreading," Natasha observed as she prepared to leave. "Not just about resistance, but about real development, about building solutions that serve people instead of controlling them." Sarah nodded, feeling Scout's steady presence beside her. "Because that's the real lesson we learned, that true progress isn't about accepting established solutions. It's about understanding your community well enough to build what it really needs." The war for the mountain town had ended, but its impact was just beginning. Sarah Chen had spent her career learning that true victory wasn't about defeating enemies or preserving systems. It was about showing people they could build something better from every challenge they faced. The real legacy wasn't in what they had protected or rebuilt. It was in what people had discovered about their own capacity to create solutions that truly served their needs. Solutions that grew stronger from every attempt to break them. Through her monitors, Sarah watched her community continue its evolution, showing that real strength wasn't about resources or systems. It was about understanding that every challenge was an opportunity to build something better, something that truly served the people it was meant to protect. The battle for Mountain Brew Cafe had become something more than a story of resistance. It had become a model for how communities could build genuine independence, not by following established patterns, but by understanding their own needs well. Enough to create solutions that couldn't be broken because they grew stronger from every challenge. The mountain town had learned the most important lesson of all, that real progress wasn't about accepting solutions imposed from outside. It was about understanding your community well enough to build what it truly needed, in ways that made control impossible because they served people instead of trying to manage them. And as Sarah Chen watched her cafe fill with people building their own future, she understood that the real victory wasn't in what they had defeated. It was in what they had created, a model of community strength that grew more powerful with every challenge it faced, because it was built on genuine understanding of what people truly needed to thrive. Up next, you got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.